name is Steve Mann, and welcome to Counterpoint B2B. Counterpoint B2B is a marketing podcast where my guests and I debate a particular B2B marketing topic. The goal is to really help other marketeers understand the nuances of the topics that we discuss, and they can make a decision for themselves what's the best approach for them based on the topic that we're discussing. The podcast itself is sponsored by Leadtail. They're a top B2B social media agency, and there's a lot of goodness coming out of them these days, so I would definitely go over there and check them out. Today's episode is called What Would Darwin Think? Just like everything else in our lives, the pandemic has made us rethink what we do and how we do it. And I know for me, I'm tired of the pandemic and tired of talking about it, but it's not going to go away anytime soon. This rethinking, the same holds true, just like it is for us, it holds true for marketing organizations as well as the marketing leader. You know, these businesses that we all work in as marketeers, they've been placed under incredibly severe evolutionary pressure, from a Darwinian perspective. And so the fundamental question is marketing expected to evolve, to move out of the pandemic and to move their organizations, their businesses forward? And if the answer is yes, can we ensure as a marketing organization that we can ensure the evolutionary success of the organization itself? Should it? And if so, how should we do that? To have this conversation today, I'm joined by Karen Hayward and Christina Ellwood. Karen is an author and international speaker, and she's the managing partner and CMO with Chief Outsiders, which is a fantastic fractional executive talent organization. She's responsible for building and supporting a team of world-class marketers and matching them with mid-market CEOs. She's written a great book. I highly recommend that you read it. It's called Stop Random Acts of Marketing, and it demonstrates to mid-market CEOs how to build strategic growth plans in the digital age. As a matter of fact, Inc. Named her book a top 10 must-read business book for 2020. Hi, Karen.
Hi, nice to see you, Steve.
Same here. Christina, she's been a CMO. Currently, she specializes in interim CMO assignments for venture-funded startups in the technology space. Her specialties include strategy, operations, marketing, sales, market pivots, which is very impressive, team building, and product management. Her passion is helping companies build market traction and to help them scale. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, so we're talking about evolution of organizations, enterprises as they're coming out of the pandemic, and that they're really under a lot of stress. What are those specific pressures that they're facing these days as a result of the pandemic?
I've been working with two different organizations over the course of the pandemic in serial assignments. The first set of pressures was around trying to get the people their footing as a remote organization and serving others who were recently going remote. Mm-hmm. So that to both sides of the equation, being remote was the big adjustment. But once people got their legs under their desk around that, then the issue really started to become how to market differently and sell differently to people who were adjusting their businesses to accommodate the pandemic. And we're now sort of in the mode of recognizing what the future is going to look like in terms of how people buy, why they buy, what they buy, and who's involved in the decision. So we've got a little more line of sight to how to market going forward. How does that square with your work, Karen?
Well, it totally squares with it. And I would add to that I think there are two things that organizations have really had to deal with. And that is, one, how is the buyer buying differently? And two, how have the buyer's needs changed? And so it's really put a lot of pressure on organizations to pivot their messaging so they're relevant and not, a way out in left field in a different world. So I think, in addition to kind of managing that whole remote transition, which you so eloquently articulated, it's really about buying process and buyer needs.
I was just thinking, who says that buying patterns have changed? Just because that we were locked down for an entire year and we were wondering if we were going to get deathly ill, why would our buying process, our buying style change? I mean, I can see us moving much more online, but if we're in B2B, that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Well, you didn't just move online though, Steve, in terms of how you communicate with people. You moved online in terms of how you considered what you needed to buy and how you were going to buy it. So what you needed to buy changed because you now needed tools to support your virtual business and to reach your customers and connect with them in a different way. So video skyrocketed, for example, as well as video tools like Zoom and so forth. I would say the other thing is that the way they went through consideration changed because you're not sitting next to the people who are involved in the buying or meeting with them on some kind of regular basis where you're face to face. So you're having to represent to others the reason to buy in a different way. So there was a lot more self-service going on. So you see a lot more companies leaning into buyer self-servicing and product-led growth than what you've seen in the past. And people are using communities more in order to learn about what they should be considering and what's working for people, where before they could go to events to meet people. Now they have to do those things online, and communities and forums have become an increasingly popular way for people to do that. Are you seeing that too, Karen?
Yeah, I think things like win-loss analysis has become incredibly more important. It was interesting. I saw a study that was done by McKinsey and a B2B study, and it said, what was the likelihood of, sustaining the new go-to-market models, i.e. Zoom video, remote meetings, all of that, over the next 12 months. And last April, they said very likely at 32%. And this August, that was up 89%. So these changes are going to stick, and for many, many reasons, not the least of which is they're a lot more efficient. And frankly, buyers want to do their research and their evaluations online, especially the millennials. They are not interested in picking up the phone and talking to a traditional sales rep ahead of doing their own market research to figure out what they really want to explore and go deeper on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say a next big thing that we're going to see is the alternative to POs, because the only reason they can't self-service all the way through the buying process today is they have to stop and get the PO. So it's compared against the budget and all that. If you had debit cards or some kind of credit card equivalent that had your budget loaded on it and you were spending that instead, you wouldn't need to have anyone else involved in the buying process beyond the people who have to use the tool or benefit from the change in the business process. So there's a huge shift in how people are buying and absorbing. The other thing that you're seeing in the market is consolidation. So, where we have this proliferation of, tools for marketing and for sales and for many other products. It's not just in our part of the world. The companies are consolidating. There's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines. And so they're using that cash to buy companies and to beef up their product portfolios rather than build new products. They're buying in their revenue from companies that were struggling to do well in the pandemic. So you suddenly have a collapse of players into a very small number of players, and you can't buy point solution tools like you used to be able to buy them. And so it's become more complex to make the decision because you don't need as much of what they're selling as they're selling. So it's become harder to buy in that area. So on the one hand, you have more self-service, but on the other hand, you have more complex products.
So I'm going back to the original question about the buying, not the buying process, but the way people buy is changing. And then you both of you gave some great examples of, more video focus, virtual event focus, but isn't that just tools? I mean, to me, that's just it's another way of engagement, but the underlying process, the underlying way I buy hasn't changed. I still want to go through an awareness phase where I want to do my research. I want to go through an evaluation phase and get deep. And then I want to go through a decision process. That hasn't changed. So I 100% agree with you that yes, there is a change, but the root, the underlying, from point A to point B to contract signature, has that process really changed?
Well, humans are still humans, so no. Humans still have to go through the same consideration process, but the way in which they traverse that has.
Okay, so it's a, would you call it a process change or a tools change? This is where I'm getting confused about this.
I think it's a process change. You know, they want to self-serve, they want to go online. There was another McKinsey study done, sorry to quote McKinsey, but they seem to be really on this topic, that talked about the trend for online digital self-service between 2016 and 2019. Just in the initial, awareness phase, it went up over that 3-year time period of the research phase, it went up 285%. So look, this is a trend that was already underway that has just picked up massive speed. And the companies that don't reorient their marketing and sales alignment and accord more of the sales process to marketing's responsibility are going to get left in the dust. No doubt about it.
I'd love to talk more about that. I mean, I agree with you that there's a shift in the same way that there are buying center shifts. There are also internal sales focus shifts. Why do you think that's happening? I mean, marketing's always been a change agent, or supposedly. We've always been at the center of a lot of organizational angst and organizational change. So why all of a sudden should organizations say, you know what? This component of the sales cycle, this component of getting a deal done has to reside within marketing. And what are those? What are those types of deals? You know, I don't know if you have a thought on that, Karen.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about it, people want to do their own research, and you have all of these companies out there that have scaled by adding more feet on the street. We'll go to more trade shows, we'll add more salespeople, we'll add more salespeople. And, many organizations, that's been very successful for them. And I think what those organizations are going to find is that marketing has become way more complicated. You look at the MarTech stack from, 5 years ago, and you look at it today, I think over 7 years, it's, there are 3,000 more solutions that you can take a look at, notwithstanding Christina's comment, which I agree with, about consolidation in the space. It's just it's more complicated, and you need to be very prescriptive in figuring out how to reach that buyer at the top of the funnel and keep them until you can hand off sales to a qualified opportunity.
Well, and let's also add 2 other components of that. One is that many products are digital products, and you can use the product itself to help sell the product, which is the product-led growth idea. And then a third component is that all businesses are moving faster all the time, and people don't have time to stop and have a lengthy, drawn-out sales process. They need to consider, make a decision, and move. And so there's just a sense of urgency that you have to be able to meet. And if you slow people down, they'll just move on to somebody else. And you see a proliferation in review sites, I think, for these reasons too, that having the ability to compare products on review sites or go places where people are doing product review videos and that sort of thing, so people can more quickly make objective decisions. They don't want the vendor to tell them. They want to find out from a peer. And so those peer review sites and peer videos are a really big factor now in selling most products, even very complex, very high-end products, physical products. When I was working with a company that was in the metal additive printing manufacturing company, for example, they sell these giant printers. Yeah, they go to shows and you have to physically show people parts that you've built on using your equipment and things like that. But they needed a way to hear from other people who were building parts that were of similar level of complexity or difficulty, who could testify to the quality of the product for them and the quality of the repeat process, because you can't test that in a demo. So more and more peer is important. And so we have to cultivate, as marketers, we have to cultivate groups of fans who will talk about their experience with our product and our company.
So that's interesting. Are you saying, and let me see if I can frame this for myself, that one of the things that are happening right now is that if there's a value volume sales model, the value model is more face-to-face, very high ticket. The volume model is broader, but it has to be more engaging. Is the volume sales cycle shifting more to marketing, or am I not understanding this correctly?
Well, I would say even in the case of the high value case where you're selling to an enterprise, a very high end product, a very complex product that requires lots of people to be involved in the decision, even there, you're seeing that the people who are involved in the technical validation or the analytical evaluation of the product want to be completely self-service. It just plays out in a different part of the organization.
So in our theme of evolution, should marketing carry a number then? I mean, should we be carrying a revenue number and be compensated against that number?
Well, in many organizations, marketing does carry a number.
Well, not as part of a direct sales effort is what I'm saying. So am I carrying a nut, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it largely depends on kind of a sales motion you're using. If you're a company like Atlassian or Slack and you sell 100% online except your largest customers, then marketing and product-led growth is carrying the number for the velocity motion. But for your enterprise motion, you're still going to have a sales team, and marketing needs to support that sales team as well. So no matter whether marketing has a little accountability or a lot of accountability to a pipeline, they will always need to be able to also service a direct sales organization that is serving the largest enterprise customers.
So who's responsible for figuring out what sales is going to sell and what marketing is going to sell? I mean, is it something that's worked out between the two of them? Is the CEO playing Solomon and split the baby in some way? How does that decision get made?
I think the customers make it.
Interesting.
And you have to figure out how the customers want to buy. And you've got to figure out how to support the way they want to buy. And that's a fundamental shift. We always used to talk about what's the sales process? What's the sales process? Well, really, I think we flipped that upside down and said, you got to meet the buyers where they are.
And so does that mean that marketing in some instances can meet the buyer better in particular circumstances than sales can? Or else why would you shift selling to marketing?
Well, it's how the buyer wants to buy. If the buyer wants to research online before they meet a salesperson, you better be online and you better have good SEO.
So interesting. Does that mean that are we, as marketeers, are we owning the whole funnel or the top of the funnel?
Well, it's not a one size fits all, and in many organizations there's a blend. So in a case where you have a complex technical product that requires multiple people to be involved in the buying process and the ticket price is high, you're going to have a mix of a traditional enterprise motion and some self-service that goes along with that. In a case where you have a product that an individual can make a decision on, both in terms of complexity and price, you may have all of it be done on a self-service model. But for many companies, you have both. So you take a company like Zendesk, for example, okay? They have a velocity motion, which is all self-service, and then you connect with an SDR when you reach a certain size. That is determined by Zendesk about when the size is high enough to be able to support a salesperson and when they can make the deal higher than they would go on their own, right? So if the buyer is going to grow on their own without any sales assistance, there's no point in giving them sales assistance. But if you can get them to grow bigger earlier by giving them sales assistance, it makes sense to put some against that. They then have a mid-market, right, which is an SDR, BDR kind of business. And then they have an enterprise sales motion. So they support three entirely different sales motions. All of them have a component of self-service, right? And only one of them is completely independent.
That makes a lot of sense. So let me ask you a question about when we were talking before the podcast. Both of you were pretty adamant about marketing being true change agents within organizations, and that the evolutionary pressures on organizations today are forcing marketing or looking to marketing to step up. I'm trying to get my head around that. Like, why is it marketing? Why isn't it customer support or sales or finance that are the change agents? What labels us as change agents? And do we actually have the skill to do it?
My experience is that it's a pragmatic issue of every change needs to be communicated. Marketing is fundamentally a communication organization. the first thing you have to do when you're making a change in the business is tell people internally about it. And then you need to change either who you're talking to or how you're talking to your market. That's reflective of the change. That's marketing's job as well. You need to enable sales to be able to make the adjustment. That's also part of marketing's job. And product has to have time to be able to go make the changes that they need to make. So marketing has to create the bridge between the old and the new in the meantime.
Right.
So it's just a practical issue that somebody has to, who is in a position to make that change real, has to be able to do the communication part of it, the planning part of it, and the execution part of getting the ball rolling. Now, everybody is involved when you make a change in an organization. It's not marketing's job to make the change completely. It's just they're the front end of that process.
Interesting. Karen?
I think they're the front end of that process because marketing is the organization that looks outside the window and really looks to what are the trends, what's coming, what's happening inside our customer base, what's happening inside the competitive base. The sales organization is so focused, and rightfully so, needs to be focused on delivering the plan this month and the plan for the quarter. And so I think marketing is one of those functions that really crosses the entire company. There's an element of marketing and customer service. There's an element of, marketing directing the sales organization. So I think it is the natural organization to lead really significant change. And the trick of it is leading it across the organization, as Christina said, not just trying to push a silo.
Yeah, I mean, you're really pointing to something important, Karen, here, which is who recognizes that there's a need for change. So my experience is that it's typically the CEO who is identifying the moment for change, but that's because of the nature of my work. I'm doing work with venture funded technology companies that are relatively small and are largely driven by a founder who has the vision for the technology and the market opportunity. So it's disproportionately driven by the CEO. But in your mid-market companies and in larger companies, you're right that marketing is looking around the corners. But marketing's role is very much the hub of what's going on in the organization. And I like to say that on marketing's right hand is sales, and they're communicating to sales what our product is and what it does and who it's for and how it's different and how it's priced and how it's different than competition and so forth. But on marketing's left hand is the product and engineering organization, and we need to bring in market requirements, competitive requirements, and timing elements, and margins and things like that. And then above that, if you think of marketing as being in the center, with that being the axis, above that you have the corporate marketing responsibilities, and below that you have the operations responsibility. So marketing is like the center of a wheel that the rest of the organizational groups are circling like satellites. And consequently, marketing has the relationships and has the opportunity to have those conversations with other groups because they're in constant communication with them as servants to those organizations.
And I think, the biggest issue can occur when there's a CRO who has marketing underneath them, and the CRO is a very sales-focused executive.
Yeah.
And that really, really hurts marketing's ability to do exactly what Christina said, which is really have an impact, around and through the entire organization.
So marketing sits at the center. We are a communication organization. We have responsibility for not only communicating internally, but externally. And that is a perspective of yours as to why we are change agents. I guess the follow-on question to that is, like, being a change agent is a bloody business. I mean, I've been in change agent situations before, and some of them I was successful, and some of them, I had to go off and lick my wounds. And it's not a very fun process sometimes. So I guess what I'm saying is I agree with you that we sit in the right place and that our role, our remit is the right remit, but not every marketer has the talent to be a change agent. It is a huge, bloody, hard job. So if that's the case, well, first of all, I believe that's the case. Can you see where I'm coming from on this?
Yeah, I can. I think that, really nobody's training young marketers today the way Christina and I got trained in our early careers.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people out there, trying to figure it out on their own or self-learn. So I think, there's a real need for mentorship and coaches and interim executive help to try and teach people how to, take a company through a strategic
Hmm.
plan.
Hmm.
Because you're right, it's not necessarily intuitive, and until you've done it, right, Christina?
It's
You,
true. Yeah. I mean, I do think that people who are attracted to marketing are attracted to the idea of reaching people,
Hmm.
connecting with people, sharing with people. Those are all really good skills if you're going to be doing change work, whether the change work is positive because we're growing, or the change work is negative because we've had a problem that results in us needing to downsize or to change, to maybe discontinue a product or something of that nature, change out of the leadership team where people may have had a lot of affection for the people who are in the leadership team. So we have the right raw materials. You do
Hmm.
have to cultivate the skills, and you do have to help people understand how that role is different than the role of communicating change to the market.
Indeed.
So it's, in both cases, you're communicating change, but it's for a different reason. And the rewards associated with doing change management and communication around change internally are very real as well. Right? Very often we're making the change in order to survive or to thrive. Well, both of those are pretty important things.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if you're a part of a very important thing, people are pretty motivated to learn how to do it, but they do need guardrails, they need mentoring, and they need process, and they need leadership. And this is where the leaders in marketing need to be talented at working cross-functionally at multiple levels in the organization. They need to be able to work with
Right.
their peers and the board, and they need to be able to work with the front line of all of the leadership and below that. And they need to be able to connect to people in a very human and authentic way. So it does lean into, frankly, where brands and culture are going in businesses today anyway, which is
Yep.
to a much more humanistic and authentic kind of leadership model. So I think we're going to find that the skills we need to change organizations are going to be developed across the organization in a way that they haven't been before. So
Right.
marketing won't be the only one who's able to activate change in the organization at scale.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that marketing is sitting in the right position. They have all the tools to be that change agent. And Karen, to your point, I don't think that uh, folks who lead marketing organizations these days have been trained to
no,
be a change agent, which is a huge job that spans not only marketing, but you have to understand all areas of the organization. You have to be extremely strategic, and you have to be able to build consensus. And depending on the type of organization, that could take months or it could take years. So I worry that we stamp marketing as the change agent because we have to, because that's where we are, versus the capability to help a company evolve out of something like a pandemic. That tickles my cerebellum. It really does. It's something that not that I stay up at night thinking about, but when we're talking about it now, it definitely concerns me.
I think there are a lot of young marketers today, certainly many of the ones I come across, who feel, well, oh, our CEO just asked me to lead a strategic plan, and they have to go away into a back room,
Yeah, yeah.
develop the plan, and come out and go, ta-da, here's the plan. And your point, Steve, I think is 100%. You have to have the leadership capability to bring an organization through consensus. And in order to do that, you need to have, a method of how you go about getting the right insights that drive the strategy that then
Yeah.
drive, the execution. And too often people start with execution, and then we get a
Mhm.
bunch of random acts, and then it doesn't work, and then everyone's frustrated, and it goes in that circular mess.
Right,
Mhm.
right. I don't have a lot of pithy or sharp ideas as to kind of how to dig out of this. Um, I know the way we were, yes, we were trained in marketing, but we were trained in business at the same time, and we worked for for people who also were many times more business people than they were marketeers. I know that's, my career is littered with that. And so I'm really concerned that we're not going to be able to, do this, that we're not going to be able to find, how do we do it? How do we get these people to a point where they can do what we know they must be doing? How do we get new marketing leadership to do that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I speaking for myself, I consider myself to be a business person first and a marketer second. And I encourage my marketers to think like business people. In fact, at this organization I'm working with today, Single Store, they have as one of their corporate values being a builder and operating like you're the boss, you own the company. And I think that's a useful model for people to follow, because that means they have to think like a business person, and what is the best use of our resources and time, and where are the capabilities to be able to execute on whatever. So it does start with having a certain amount of expectation and providing people some frameworks and guidance, and then providing people the opportunity to try and to improve. So they need to be given smaller things so that when bigger things come along, they have the skills when they get there. And every marketing campaign affords you an opportunity to communicate about change.
True.
Right? So to me, this is not a separate thing, and it's not unique to pandemic. It's just part of being a marketer. And when we talk about what's happening in the marketplace and why is it changing the way it is, and therefore what are we doing differently, you're communicating about change. That's
right.
What you're doing. So I don't see this as a big problem.
Interesting. Are there organizations that you think won't succeed in evolving out of our current morass?
Well, sure, for many reasons, right? There are organizations that aren't going to make it because they've lost their customer for too long and they don't have enough money to survive through. You can just look at the restaurants and hospitality industry in general, that, you can only go so long surviving on your bank account. At some point you run out of bank account and you have to close the doors entirely. So yeah, there are businesses that aren't going to come back from this pandemic. But there are also businesses that have thrived in this pandemic, and there are many who have dog paddled their way to the future, and they've done that by doing a lot of internal change.
Okay.
And you have to give some of these businesses credit for the amount of change they've gone through in order to survive. I have a friend who's a senior level person in a very large trade show vendor company, for example, and they have done some very creative things to be able to keep their workforce employed and working when there are no trade shows that are being held, right? So they've built hospitals and they've done all kinds of things to survive through the pandemic, and they've kept their edge, they've kept their team, they've kept their skills up, and they're ready to go when things open up.
So they found other ways. They found other ways to leverage their skills to keep sharp. So that's an interesting evolutionary advance. What about you, Karen? Have you any organizations or what type of organization won't survive, I guess?
Well, I think you started out talking about Darwin. It's those that won't adapt. So the industrial companies out there in the mid-market that say, we're just going to continue to grow with feet on the street.
Right.
And we're going to continue to do that the old way. They're not going to change their sales process. They're going to do that. Here's our outbound presentation. When you sell over Zoom, you have to sell completely differently.
True.
You can't just get on a Zoom call and pull up a PowerPoint deck and 37 slides later, say, what did you think? So you really have to retool your sales organization. And I think the people that don't do that and don't rebalance the focus of sales resource to marketing, because when you look at that whole sales funnel, marketing, and I'm making generalizations here, to Christina's point, if you're an enterprise, having that person run that sales process is quite different, but there's still an imbalance, certainly in the mid-market, where people are over investing in sales, and sales ahead of having a marketing plan.
True.
And then the salespeople get on board and they go, well, where are the leads? Right? That's the first question. Where are the leads? Well, what do you mean leads? We hired you. You're supposed to find the leads. Where's your
Right.
Rolodex?
Right.
Well, wait a minute. I don't have a Rolodex. Right? So it's so funny. Those are the companies I think that are really in a struggle.
That makes a lot of sense. I agree with you 150%. I could talk about this topic forever because I just love the notion of change agencies and being a change agent and evolution. But we're getting close to time here. So I was curious if y'all had some, last words of wisdom for marketers who've been put in this change agent position and how to kind of, to your point, Christina, dog paddle their way to success.
Well, I mean, I made the point earlier that that it's important to have the people who are using your product or service speaking about your product or service, and serving those people is another skill that we have to develop in marketing. How do you speak to users, and how do you speak to advocates of your product, and how do you encourage them and not reward them in the classic sense, but reward them with recognition or amplification of their message or what have you? How do you make it worth their trouble to learn about your product and to write about it or speak about it? I think that's a very interesting area. And I think 5 years from now, you are not going to see classic enterprise marketing at all. I think you're going to see a whole raft of skills related to self-service and product-led growth. You're going to see a whole set of skills related to activating the users or the beneficiaries of your product to advocate for you. And you're going to see a whole set of products that are about bringing those two things together to make it easy to find the category of products you're looking for and to pick the one that's right for your organization. So I think that's where we're going, and we all need to change with it. So, we need to be a change agent for our own function.
That's fascinating. That really is fascinating. I like your perspective. What about you, Karen? Last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think you got to follow the voice of the customer. So it's a build on where Christina left off. I think you have to be aggressively out there twice a year doing win-loss analysis. Why are we winning? Why are we losing? With an independent, voice doing that. I think, making sure you have a really tight net promoter score strategy, that you're measuring, net promoter score when someone signs an agreement. You're measuring net promoter score when someone implements this. You have to be collecting that customer feedback in a systemic way to understand how your customer is experiencing your product. So it's all about, having the customer really help guide the organization to ensure it's fulfilling, all it can.
Yeah, that customer centricity it's a
Huge.
powerful force, right?
It's all about the buyer.
Exactly right.
Always has been. The whole reason we're in business is to serve the buyer.
100%.
So last question is an off-topic question in the spirit of Inside the Actor's Studio. So Christina, what's your favorite word?
My favorite word?
Yeah, your favorite word.
Oh my. I'm going to have to ask Karen to go first because I just have never been asked this question. I have to think about it.
Neither have I. So
my work.
Karen, what's your favorite word?
I do have a favorite word. It's grace.
It's grace.
Oh, I like that. Very good. Yes. I would say probably peace.
Peace. All right.
But, if I'm wound up and having trouble sleeping or something like that, that's where I go, is to think about peace and peaceful places and peaceful sense of the world. And that, I guess, is where I want to ground, is in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think both grace and peace are perfect for where we are right now.
What's your favorite word?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It's children.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one too.
I've got triplet daughters.
Aww.
And I've got a 30-year-old son, and I've got 2 stepkids. So children are pretty robust in my life.
Love it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I'm a fan of kids myself. Yeah, that's great. You're very lucky to have so many in your life.
I sure am. It's a labor of love, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much. I had such a good time, and I really appreciate your perspectives, and welcome back anytime. This will be a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks, Steve. It's always a pleasure. And Karen, it's always a pleasure to see you again and to have a chance to talk together again. Thanks for this opportunity, Steve.
Good
My
to see
pleasure.
you
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, Steve.